The Chinese regime is facing unprecedented threats to its political stability, and the only way forward is to close down the country and start another cultural revolution. Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang, and thank you so much for watching today. Make sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't, and leave a comment below what your thoughts are on our topic today. Now, it would be unimaginable a few years ago to say that China is like North Korea. But today, China is the next hermit kingdom under Xi Jinping. Yes, we are seeing China march on the path to close down its borders and start a whole new cycle of political movements like it's the 1960s. Because unlike 10 years ago, today's Xi Jinping faces an unprecedented challenge from within and outside the system. It's a multitude of threats coming in all at once to Xi's face. And the only way seems to be borrowing a strategy from Mao's playbook, which is to go down another path of the Cultural Revolution in China. For the first time in many years, we saw a part of the Chinese military targeted for corruption, which tells us that it's an excuse to purge those who are not loyal to Xi Jinping. What this means is that the People's Liberation Army, in this case the rocket force that controls nuclear weapons, showed dissent from Xi Jinping, which is never going to be allowed. But if one force within the military shows such disloyalty, couldn't other forces also feel the same way? I mean, they are being sent to fight a war potentially that would end really badly for them with their bodies in graves. Xi Jinping will now basically have to purge the entire military system of bad seeds. That's while the Chinese economy is in a state worse than ever before. It's being compared to the 1950s when the CCP was isolated internationally. So it's been a terrible year for Xi's book on economic thoughts. And if you haven't read that book, I don't recommend you do because it doesn't teach you anything about the economy. What it does teach you is one aspect, and it's pretty important. It's that don't get yourself so hated around the world that you get your technology access blocked off by Western nations. Now, of course, we have to talk about manufacturing. In China, it was known as the #1 industry, but this year it has slumped essentially through the first half of 2023. The economic recovery after 3 years of zero COVID is also not looking too hot. And I mean, what happens to the people? Well, they either revolt or do nothing. To the CCP, the biggest threat is the awakening of the Chinese people. Well, this is the reality. The CCP is afraid of the people, so they must employ every tool to oppress the people. Now, over the years, fear has built up, and so revolt is not easy, which means people would just stop doing things because that's more passive, but it's a silent protest. And that's what basically people did. They stopped spending, stopped caring, stopped waiting to seek a better life. And this silent protest against the system is an imminent danger to the production need of the CCP. Now, consumerism is at an all-time low, which means that a lot of it has to do with young people. Now, most of the younger generation outside of brainwashed pro-CCP trolls, they've realized what a facade the communist system is. So reality is setting in with the younger people as they cannot find a job. College education and career paths in China are still based on guanxi, a relationship that is with the right people. It's leading to them to give up on life achievements. Now, the unemployment among youth is so bad that the CCP announced they will be stopping the publishing of data on that number, which means that it tells you exactly why, right? It's gotten so bad that they can no longer publish the data without being an embarrassment. And of course, the official number last time was around 20%, 21% of unemployment among youths aged 16 to 24. But now, as one professor estimates, it could be as high as 46-something%. Now, the corruption of the party, with the society going downward, it's giving a negative outlook on life. The international situation, like I said, don't get yourself so isolated in the first place, but that's what's happening now. The Chinese regime has made enemies with everybody around them. From being on the wrong side of the Ukraine war to alienating countries like the Philippines, South Korea, and India, China has set off a whole new campaign called de-risking around the world. It's like everybody wants to run away from China. And again, these issues, it's causing what the CCP feels is the factor of instability in Beijing. Now, the typical CCP strategy is to force people to get up and move. The only way, though, to force them is by doing a political movement on the masses. And that's why I'm saying that we're going to see something like the Cultural Revolution happen in China once again. Now, the actions, some parts of it have already taken place. For example, last week, a U.S. immigration agency in Shanghai had its chairwoman arrested. Decades of immigration records were turned over to the police. So this comes as China started cutting people's passports starting during the pandemic. So leaving China is getting harder and harder for many people. And that's, of course, one part to prevent the outflow of cash and funds because the country is desperately needing a lot of money. But on the other part is they don't want people to leave the country and never come back. So they're cracking down on the ideas of immigration. Preventing people from leaving is, of course, a classic case of communism. I mean, it happened during the Cold War with East Berlin, and it precisely shows us why it's a failed ideology. As President Kennedy said, democracy is not perfect, but we have never had to put up a wall to keep our people inside, right, to prevent them from leaving. And so recently, another wave of catching CIA spies in China is also serving as a warning to people, because while you're in China, chances are you could be seen as a traitor to the state and then arrested. So if you can leave China, I'd recommend that you go. And this is giving a lot of political fear because this is exactly what happened during the Cultural Revolution. And this fear of espionage was put into law back in July. This new called this counter-espionage law basically is what many older people would know as, quote, take down the American imperialist spies. And China's also been storing up food by turning over forests into farmlands, setting up new management teams, one for farmers and rural villagers, and the other one is for culture. And of course, we know that the cultural management team is essentially has all the flavors of the Cultural Revolution. And meanwhile, the farmer management team, they're set up to control food production, right? It's like Mao Zedong all over again. Now, you could say that this leads to a potential invasion of Taiwan, and all the necessary preparation is to ensure that people would follow willingly or by force to the end with the CCP. But still, think about it. Even a few years ago, right before COVID, you wouldn't have thought that China is going to go back to the Mao Zedong era. After all, they've enjoyed so much advancement and growth, right? Well, here's the thing. The core issue of the CCP has always been political security. And the CCP, of course, can be divided into three eras. The first is the Mao Zedong era. And then the second is the reform and the opening era under Deng Xiaoping. And now we have the third one, which is the Xi era. Now, if you put them all on a spectrum, 1 being open and free and 10 being hardcore communist, I put Mao in like 9 to 10. Deng Xiaoping will be somewhere on like a 3 to 4 with his two successors. And then Xi Jinping started out as a 5, but now he's moving heavily towards the 8. So it can be said that the Mao's way of maintaining political security was through hardcore political movements, whereas Deng Xiaoping's reform and opening up can be contributed to two parts, which is relax economically but not politically. Now when we arrive at Xi Jinping's era, it's going backwards to that of Mao. This is what happened with the Soviet Union under Mikhail Gorbachev, which basically, he had the whole glasnost policy, which means openness, particularly the openness of information. And then he also had the perestroika, which means restructuring. So that's, of course, talking about the communist system. And Gorbachev let open two parts, right? The economy and the political system to public reform. And that's what directly caused the downfall of the Soviet Union to come so much quicker. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, it was a confirmation to the inside of the CCP that they cannot, no matter what, give up the control of the ideology and the political aspect, which even during Deng Xiaoping's era, you saw them, what they did to the Tiananmen Square students. It's a grip on the political aspect that they can't give up. Now, after the country has gone through decades of growth, the potential for relaxation on the ideological aspect is coming, right? Regardless of how hard the CCP tries to control it. With Xi Jinping, his backward policy, it's because the threat to the political ideology worries him so much. The only way is to go back. It's to accelerate the country towards its own demise. But then again, at the same time, to Xi Jinping, surrounded by yes men, with nobody to offer him sound advice, his only vision is to maintain that, thinking that's the only way toward stability, which is by moving the country to destruction. Even many in the party view this as a mess, a stage 4 cancer patient. But that's basically their own fault to begin with, right? When it was time that they were in the earlier stages of cancer, these CCP officials were drowning in corrupted luxury and ignoring the problems. Now that the end is coming, they have no more say. It's become a concentration of power. So that in the end, it's all of their own doings, creating Xi Jinping's era, and now they can't stop it. All right, this is it for today's episode on China Insider, how the CCP is facing multiple threats all at once, particularly when it comes to threatening their political stability. If you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like, comment below what your thoughts are, and also subscribe to our channel. All right, that's it for today. See you next time. Bye-bye.